poem cannot change the world. I know that as well as I know the hands that write it. I know that as many metaphors as I use, I cannot transfigure pain to magic despite how many times I compare them. I cannot use similes to exchange bleeding hearts with mine despite how willing I am to let mine go. I know that onomatopoeia cannot change the way the crack of a bullet sounds against a wall with the soft pattering of rain. And I know that no amount of personification can turn pain and misery, give it a name and a face that makes it easier to chase down and hate. But a poem changes me. The poem changes the fingers that grip the edges of the pen, that are trying to squeeze out hope from the dregs of the remaining ink. A poem goes from my lips and goes and rests on drooping eyelids, and it makes brighter, kinder days when the skies are darkening. A poem cannot change the world, but it was never meant to try. All a poem can do is be an unrelenting witness. All a poem should do is try to make the world stop, breathe, and scrutinize. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Harnidh Kaur, and I'm a public policy master student. So I spend my time wondering why we went wrong and how we went wrong. I also moonlight as a poet once or twice, and I write about policy. Now, you need to understand why that happens. Policy works on a simple method. You try to help the largest number of people you can at any given point in time. Now, the problem is that when you're trying to provide for a large number of people, you're taking away resources and ability from the vulnerable minorities, solely because it's majoritarian ability, right? Now, the problem is that the people we take away from are the marginalized, the victims, and the silenced. I'm not talking about people who don't have a voice, because everyone has a voice. Silence is a social construct. People have been silenced generation after generation, and hence we believe that people who don't have a voice also do not have a perspective. That's why my poetry comes in. That's what I try to build together. I call myself a policy poet, and I try to make sure that the world is hearing what people need to say. But this has forced me to learn a couple of lessons, very unpleasant lessons. Lesson number one, a poem cannot change the world. I know I tried. You know, when you go into writing, when you go into creating, you're told that, oh my God, art is amazing. It will change the world. Here's the problem. Art exists in a bubble. Art exists without any sort of engagement. It's great to think of the fact that you write a poem about the humanitarian crisis in Kashmir and something will change, but it doesn't change the fact that a 12-year-old was killed by a stray bullet that came from an army gun last year. It would be great to believe that academic papers outlining the problems would also equate to solutions, but they don't, because we refuse to engage. We're terrible people as creators and academicians, because we believe that our bubble is the only one that exists. Our intersectionality doesn't come into the fray at any point in time, because we forget that context is a key word that we never used in our research papers and poems and letters and whatnot. Bubbles are terrible to live in. Bubbles are what caused Donald Trump to rise. Bubbles are the reason we're facing a crisis of moral conscience. Bubbles are the reason that we're floating away from reality, and now is the time that we must pop them. So, why bubbles? Why do bubbles happen? Bubbles happen because of this terrible, terrible word called apathy. Understand one thing. Apathy is not just I don't want to do something. Apathy is I know what's wrong and I refuse to do something. And the thing is, I can't blame you for your apathy. It's not your fault. You've been fed apathy. Apathy is the most profitable business in the world today, because people don't want you to know what's going on. I sound like a conspiracy theorist right now, I'm well aware. But the point is that A armed citizen is one that's armed with knowledge. That makes them a dangerous citizen. You've all been fed complacency. You've all been fed apathy. And we are reveling in it. We are creating within that bubble of apathy. This is problematic, right? Because apathy continues till a protest happens on the street where you go and join. But the point of a revolution is that you build one, you don't just pitch into one. That's where you and I come into the fold. We as creators, we as academicians, we as people who have ability to create worlds out of what we do. So if today I ask of you to take something from this talk, I'd ask of you to remember how things burn. You can't burn something, you can't light a fire without consuming something else. Understand where apathy comes from and try to burn through that. And I wouldn't say that to you if I didn't know how to do it. This is something that I practice a lot. I take workshops with students on this. So it's a quick guide to educated and well-informed dissent in a country that's slowly moving and becoming very, very difficult to dissent in, as we have seen again and again in many universities. So a quick guide to dissent. Number one, educate yourself. This is something that we take for granted. Oh, I know what I'm talking about. The point is that we don't. 9 out of 10 times our opinions are based on fallacies that have been fed to us. We move ahead with half-baked ideas, what we think is right and wrong. Step back. Step back, read. Step back, analyze. Step back and wonder if you're right or not. Unless and until you educate yourself, you cannot educate someone else. Unless and until you are capable enough of formulating your own thought process and bringing about critical thinking ability, you could not possibly give it to someone else. That's where educators come in. You need to force students to think. As people on social media, don't share that goddamned article. Go ahead, read about it. Hold on. You don't know everything. And the moment you respect your limitations as a human being is the moment you have some humility in your ability to have knowledge, you learn. Number two, let others educate you. How many of you have gotten into a random debate on social media with some rabid right-winger? Raise your hands. No? Yes. Yeah, so somebody says something infuriating. If you're a woman and there's a feminist post and somebody says something like, hey, we don't need feminism in this country, and you just are really angry at that moment, so you go ahead and you write a rant that will not make a single change, right? You know that on one level. Nothing will happen. But you still want to talk. Continue doing that. Debating is a lost art form. Engaging is a lost art form. Why are liberals losing around the world? Is it because they don't understand what people need? No, they do. They definitely do. What they don't know is how to convey those ideas. You cannot convey an idea unless you engage. You understand where the other side comes from. Let others educate you of their viewpoints, even if you were not accepting of it. There's no harm in shutting up for once. Try it. It's quite an interesting experience. Number three, contribute. There are incredible NGOs doing incredible work. They are going to grassroots levels. They're giving unbiased, free primary education to students. We don't know about them because, again, media has fed us apathy. Find out. Go engage with them. Contribute in your personal ability. You can give 100 rupees a month. Give it to gift a meal. They give street children food for an entire month for a contribution of 100 bucks. Small things. Money matters. Let no one tell you otherwise. Money is what makes the world go round, and you can take your vast privileged resources and provide it to somebody who could take some help from that. Involve yourself. How many times have you heard of a great talk that's going to happen? Brilliant academicians are coming and they're going to speak about the world, the government, and you're telling yourself, this time I will go. And then you just like, chuck it, there's a movie on, I want to sleep a little more, etc., etc. I study policy, I do it every week, at least. Engage. with debate, with discourse, with panels, with talks. These are melting pots of culture. These are the only places where debate is allowed freely in personal contact. When you see what is happening in Delhi University, in JNU, in all the universities in India, they are attacking these places. Why? Because debate and discourse is the only way you can break through another person's walls. Involve yourself, ask around any talks happening this month, ask around any poetry slams happening this month. Go ahead and participate. Go ahead just to hear them. Why is that important? Because unless and until you understand perspective, how will you understand where yours lacks or theirs improves yours? Do it. Involve yourself. Recognize the signs. Umberto Eco is one of my favorite authors. He wrote this beautiful essay called On Fascism, which is outlining 14 signs of fascism he saw coming up in Mussolini's Italy. Today, when you go home, just Google 14 signs of fascism, it'll come up, and read. Recognize the signs of what's happening around you. Recognize the fact that this is a pattern of history repeating itself. We are privileged. We're privileged because we have ability to look back. We have resources at hand. We have first-person accounts of what went wrong and how it went wrong. We are not entering a brand new epoch of history. It's just a cycle repeating itself. And we can educate ourselves. Learn to recognize signs. Learn to look at the macro patterns around you. This requires you to go back to point number 1 and educate yourself, of course. But these signs are visible. All you need to do is open a book. Very difficult to do in the age of clickbait and BuzzFeed listicles, I agree. But try it. Support the arts. I started with saying a poem cannot change the world, but when I talk about that poem, it comes from a place of privilege. When I write poetry as a young woman living in urban Mumbai from a very well-off strata, I write of experiences I might not have had. I leech off someone else's experiences. But there are thousands of young poets out there writing in their own mother tongues, writing in circumstances that are very, very difficult, but they do not find patrons because we are not engaging with the arts. The moment you give freedom of expression and creativity a boost, by pursuing those artists, sharing their posts on social media, buying their books, supporting independent publishers, you're giving dissent a creative voice. This is the smallest thing you can do. Attend a local gig the next time you're out. Go and hear some political poetry the next time you're out. When you go to a bookshop, buy an indie publisher's book instead of just going to Flipkart and buying off the bigger publishers. These are small things, but they can change the way you are supporting your artists. The moment an artist is independent and capable of supporting themselves on the art itself, they are capable of creating constructive debate. Provide them that ability. It's in your hands as a consumer. Which brings me to why. The status quo as it stands, the media is not your friend. The media is bought out. The media is not telling you what's going on, which is terrifying if you ask me. If I don't know what was the actual GDP growth of my own country for the last quarter, what do I know? I don't know much, do I? Support good media. There's independent, unbiased media. You need to understand what media does in a democracy. It's called the fourth estate. The fourth estate is a very simple concept. They keep the other portions of society in check. It's a checks and balance system. If you forget media, you are forgetting that the institutions have to be answerable to the citizens in some form or the other. Elections are one, yes. But you need to learn how to read better media. Support your newspapers. Buy paid subscriptions. They don't cost much. For example, I remember reading someone's tweet yesterday which went on, the Outlook is for 60 rupees now. I cannot buy it. You're very happy spending 500 bucks for a movie, right? But the Outlook is a good magazine. It gives you unbiased reportage. Pay for media. Media at this moment could save us from ourselves, from the mess we've gotten ourselves into. And trust me, we're in a big, big, big mess. You really need to move on. Pass on the mic. We're privileged. I love the word privilege. It reminds me of how obnoxiously privileged I am all the time. Whenever somebody comes and says, I need a voice, Don't try to speak for them. Cede space to them. Give them the mic. Let them speak for themselves. This comes into the form of intersectionality. When you see a panel of men talking about women's rights, you know where you're going wrong, right? When you see a panel of upper caste people sitting and discussing Savarna politics and how the Dalits are being oppressed in the country, they are speaking from academic reading, not from experience. Pass on the mic. Intersectionality, do it in your everyday life. Let people fight their battles and support them as good allies. Difficult, it is very difficult because you're so used to hearing your own voice, right? You're so used to being right all the time. The biggest lesson here is stepping back, of course. We are in a state of crisis. It's terrible, it's terrifying, and we don't know it. We've been kept in the silence for very long. We're very happy, we're very complacent because that's what they've allowed us to be. Acknowledge that we're in a state of crisis, acknowledge that we don't know it, and acknowledge the fact that the only people who can change it, you and I. There's no one coming to save us. There's no superhero, there are no Avengers here. It's just us, common average students with a phone in our hands and the power of the internet with us. You know what? Create. A poem cannot change the world, and I still stand by it, but a poem changes people. Somebody will read what you write, somebody will see what you create, somebody will engage with your art. A poem does not change the world, ladies and gentlemen, but it changes people. And people, I believe we can change the world. Thank you.